In early times, simple stupas were made in shrines of the Buddhist and Jaina faiths. As divinity was seen in all that there is, these served as aids to meditation upon the formless eternal. The world of separated forms around us was considered to be an illusion. In the search for the truth, the veils of illusion had to be lifted so that we could see beyond. In the 1st century, deities in Indian art had been created in human form. They were created to provide a support to minds not prepared to comprehend the formless abstract. The deities were many, all different aspects of the one formless truth. By the 5th century, sublime forms were created in sculpture and painting. The noble aim for the artist was to create the human form which rose above itself. It was not the human being who was caught in the web of the material world. It was an embodiment of that which was eternal, that which was still, undisturbed by turmoil and cravings. Meditating upon such a form, devotees awakened the best within themselves. They rose above the pains created by their own desires and confusion. In the sculptures of this period, the Buddha personifies an inner calm, in which the noise and confusion of the material world cannot disturb, where the armies of Mara have failed. The only true victory is that over the restless mind, the mind which darts about and will not be still. The mind has been brought to look upon itself and be fully occupied. In this period, the form was created to express that which is the spiritual state of the Buddha, one who has left behind the turbulence of the material world. Behind lowered eyelids, the look is within. The mind is not disturbed by the illusions of the passing world. It is still. It is not the conquest of the world, but the conquest of the mind which is the theme here. Inscriptions state that these were made beautiful through the science of chitra, or art making. It is around this time that the Chitra Sutra, the oldest known treatise on art, was penned, out of traditions which were ongoing. As time progressed, a complex pantheon of deities was created. The last Buddhist caves of Western India of the 7th century AD present many images of different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The developments which led to these manifestations took place largely in the plains of eastern India. The Buddha gave a rational, philosophic message to his followers. He spoke of the three noble truths: that there was pain in the world, that there was a reason for the pain, and that it could be removed by following the right path. Nirvana was the extinguishing of one's ego and self in the realization of one's true nature. The responsibility of salvation lay entirely upon the individual and his own efforts to discipline himself. Many found the path easier when they could pray to the Buddha and seek his benign help. In time, compassionate beings on their way to enlightenment, or bodhisattvas, were also conceived. They delayed their own salvation to help all sentient beings on the path. This new branch of Buddhism soon had many followers and began to call itself the Mahayana order, or the Great Vehicle. Meanwhile, in the land of Magadha, in the eastern plains of India, where the Buddha had preached, great centers of Buddhist study came up. These had the bountiful support of Buddhist and Brahmanical kings of the region, and they developed into vast monastic universities. At these centers of learning, the message of the Buddha and his many qualities of wisdom and compassion were studied in great detail. These qualities of Buddhahood were personified in a pantheon of deities which was created. By meditating upon the personified qualities, a worshipper was to imbibe the virtues presented. Having attained those qualities, one became that deity. Three of the best-known Buddhist universities, Nalanda, Vikramshila and Udantapuri, were in eastern India, in the region of present-day Bihar. In fact, Bihar derives its name from the many viharas that flourished here. The greatest of these monastic centers was at Nalanda. It was a hub of learning where pilgrims and scholars came from all corners of Asia. Excavations at the Nalanda site have revealed numerous stupas, monasteries, hostels, staircases, meditation halls, and other structures. These speak of the splendor of the university, which was also famed for its 3 magnificent libraries. There was a thriving intellectual environment at Nalanda, which produced the most noted Buddhist thinkers. The 8th century saw the founding of the Pala Empire, which ruled over most of Bengal and Bihar till the 12th century. It was a period of flourishing trade and prosperity. The Palas were generous patrons of monasteries and art. Towards the end of the 8th century, Dharmapala founded a great university in present-day Bihar. The Vikramshila University, which was to rival the importance of Nalanda itself. By this time, Buddhism had entered its 3rd major phase, the Vajrayana school. It was this sophisticated philosophy which blossomed in the vibrant intellectual atmosphere of Vikramshila. In earlier Buddhist thought, liberation was possible only through many lifetimes of effort. The Vajrayana offered the possibility of nirvana within a single lifetime. At the heart of this system was the teacher-initiate relationship, where the seeker was guided by his teacher. Complex rituals, mantras or chants, and mudras or hand movements of Vajrayana Buddhism were codified in the form of tantras. Tantra literally means to carry on knowledge. The emphasis in this period was on the intellectual quest. This is constantly reflected in the art. Previous art had been more naturalistic. Its focus had been on a gentleness which moved us and dissolved our sense of the ego, which transported us through grace and ecstasy. The purpose of the art remained the same in this period. However, the dynamism of the intellect, which analyzes the mental processes of the realization of the truth, came to the fore. The many qualities of Buddhahood within each of us and the steps on the path to enlightenment came to be studied and presented in detail. The qualities which move us towards a realization of the truth were presented in a manner which left no room for ambiguity or doubt. This was Vajrayana Buddhism, the vehicle of the thunderbolt, whose logic was as clear and as striking as a clap of thunder. It was also as indestructible as a diamond. Such is the intellectual vigor which is presented in the art of the Pala period. The Indian philosophy of aesthetics holds that our response to beauty is a realization of the grace which underlies all of creation. A grace which is in all that there is around us. The perception of beauty, past the veils of our illusions, awakens us to a joyous awareness of the truth. In this period of great intellectual vigor, the deities represent complex parts of realization. One of the most remarkable qualities of the art and philosophy of this time is the intellectual freedom which it represents. There appears to be no limit to the diversity in which the personal visualizations of the deities are presented. We see from the numberless variations in the mandalas and in the deities that there was great freedom of thought and expression. Great teachers from the vast universities of Nalanda and Vikramshila had different approaches to the following of the path to enlightenment. As recorded in the surviving traditions of Tibet and the Indian Himalaya, the coming there of each teacher from these universities began a new wave of understanding. Each teacher brought fresh nuances in the practice of the faith. Many sects with different practices continue their legacies till today. It is a wonderful blend of the continuation of ancient knowledge with the living experience and realization of each new thinker. In the Magadha region stands the Mahabodhi temple, which commemorates the event of the enlightenment of the Buddha. Though greatly restored over the centuries, this 5th or 6th century temple is the oldest grand structure surviving in India. The architecture and sculptures would have inspired the Buddhist art of many Asian countries, from where pilgrims constantly came here. By the 5th century, the search for enlightenment had developed from a solitary personal exercise to an organized intellectual endeavor. Seals excavated at Nalanda show that the great monastic university here was patronized by the Gupta kings. The earliest remains of monuments and sculptures found here date from the 6th and 7th centuries. Even in its damaged state, the main temple rises over 100 feet. stucco figures of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas made here set the style which we see in numerous later stone and bronze images. They have sharper features than ever before and convey an impression of the dynamic intellect on which the focus has gone at this time. We see the carrying forward of the artistic traditions of the Sarnath Gupta and post-Gupta periods here. The torsos are smoothly delineated and the body is visible through the diaphanous garments. Half-closed eyes convey the serenity and peace of the earlier deities. Another temple at Nalanda has reliefs on the plinth. These are among the very few stone sculptures of the Pala period which survive in situ. Great stupas were also made further east, in present-day Tripura and Bangladesh. Terracotta plaques with relief adorn the plinths which remain of the once grand structures at Paharpur and Pilak. These reflect Vajrayana developments in Buddhism and are full of life and vitality. Crowned Buddhas, instead of the earlier bareheaded ascetic figures, began to appear in Pala times. The crown here denoted the highest spiritual achievement. Wrathful bodhisattvas also began to appear. These are to awaken the determination and ardent vigor with which the devotee must pursue the search for the truth, the fearlessness with which one must face the obstacles and confusions on this path. In many parts of India, the 8th and 9th centuries saw an increase in the number of bronze images. Metal images of the Pala period are among the finest which were ever produced. The areas where the largest number have been found are Nalanda and Kurkihar near Bodhgaya. Some bronzes are simple compositions with expressions of infinite gentleness and compassion. They also have a lilting grace, which reminds us that there is an end to the sorrow of the world. Later Pala art is complex and presents the many traditional motifs of Indian art around the main central figure. The deities are increasingly formalized, and the iconographic concepts embodied in their various attributes become more important. The number of bodhisattvas and Buddhas identifiable by their different attributes increased. As in the Brahmanical art of this period, female deities, who are the counterparts of the male ones, become prolific. These were first seen in the caves of Western India in the 6th century. The path to salvation is now through intense meditation on the qualities of Buddhahood, depicted in these deities and on complex diagrams. Metal images were much easier to transport than large stone ones. It is these which travelled to Nepal, Tibet, and further northwards, as well as to the countries of Southeast Asia. The sculptures transmitted the concepts and styles of Indic art far and wide in this period. The writings of the Tibetan historian Taranatha and considerable archaeological remains show that Orissa was another great center of Buddhism in Pala times. In the Asya hill range are some of the most important Buddhist sites of the period. As in Bihar, the deities of Vajrayana Buddhism are depicted in large numbers in Orissa. At Udaigiri and other sites, we find several images of benign bodhisattvas. They stand in graceful and relaxed postures which mark the Buddhist art of Orissa. Complex iconographic deities are also found, such as a Samvara from Ratnagiri. He holds many attributes in his numerous hands, which provide a detailed visual representation of philosophic concepts. Advanced forms of Tantric Buddhism were developed and traveled from here to the countries of Southeast Asia. The Pala period is one of the great ages of vibrant Buddhist thought and of mankind's philosophic quest.